So I'm out here with two of Kent's finest. We have Officer Cortinas and Sergeant Tung. You two are involved in recruiting, specifically in recruiting with Kent PD. And I had seen an article and some TV news come out recently that Kent says they are fully staffed. And that's really rare out here. A lot of departments have really struggled to find new recruits, struggling with attrition, a whole lot of issues. And so I really wanted to sit down and talk with you and find out, what are you doing different that seems to be working? So maybe we start off with, what's your background? How did you end up at Kent? Officer Cortinas, how did you end up here?
So I started in corrections. That was back in 2011. Back then there would be, 1,000 applicants and 2 openings. So corrections was a great launching point for me. Spent 3 years there, and it turned me into a really good candidate. Going from a 22-year-old kid with some college and no military to a 25-year-old with a lot of very relevant training and experience from the jail. And then so just about 9 years now, almost here at Kent. I've been work patrol, and I've been an FTO. It's a field trainer. That's somebody who takes somebody right out of the academy and does that training, that portion of training. I spent some time up in detectives. We've got a cool program there where we can do like a 6-month stint. Just like we have a lot of different things here at Kent that just really benefit the body and the officers. But I'm a member of the defensive tactics team. I'm a hostage negotiator or crisis negotiator. And my primary role right now, though, is being a recruiter.
Very cool. Sergeant Tung, what's your story?
Yeah, so upon graduating from UW, I'd already been looking at types of careers I wanted to get into. Public service was a huge interest of mine. I wanted to be the boots on the ground, literally. I wanted to be out there and just helping people and making a difference, like the same reason why a lot of people get into public service. Tested for police and fire, and a lot of doors open for police. And so I found myself getting hired by Kent Police the summer upon graduating. And it's been a ride since, right? I got started in patrol like everyone does, typically in a police department. I became a field training officer. I became part of the civil disturbance team, so the kind of crowd control, protest regional group. And then I went into K9, so K9 generalist, which is, as you'd imagine, the type of K9 that tracks suspects and finds evidence. It was a German Shepherd that I worked with for a number of years until I promoted to patrol sergeant. And then following being patrol sergeant for a few years, I got into our neighborhood response team prior to getting into recruiting with Brian, which is a new version of an effort that we've had for a while.
Very cool. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with Kent, I've lived around here my whole life, and people know Seattle. Kent's a big city, a very big city, very diverse city. There's a lot of warehouse space. It's a huge area for things that are coming in from the ports in Seattle. Wide range of people who live out there, large amount of business. It can be a spicy place. So for a lot of officers who are looking or potential officers who are looking for a department, this is one you can kind of do anything, a wide range of stuff. Tell me a little bit about the city and what types of things you deal with.
So, yeah, we're the 6th largest city in the state. We're directly in the middle of Seattle and Tacoma. And the diversity, I've heard the number, eighth most diverse city in the country. We have the most spoken languages in the Kent School District than any other school district in the country. So it's pretty amazing there. And then in regards to, the crime rate, people have been seeing it probably on the news and whatnot, but our people have been feeling it. With that comes that daily impact that a lot of people are looking for in law enforcement when you're wanting to go join law enforcement. It's not an agency where you're going to spend a lot of time reading books to kids. I get to do that in my role. I love doing the outreach part, but we're not spending a ton of time being able to make TikTok dances and videos and relaxing. We're grinding, we're working. So you mentioned, being fully staffed. We're not right now. That article now is several months old, but even then, our officers, it's a grind.
Do you have anything you want to add to the dynamics of the city?
Yeah, it's a very dynamic city, right? So it's a lot of challenges. We have a huge range of types of people, right? And you mentioned businesses. There's a lot of suburban area. There's a lot of apartments. There's a lot of transit, and so with that, it's a lot of why I came to Kent. I had a couple offers on the table, and what we find is that candidates that gravitate towards what we have is people that want to make that impact and they want the pace. And we'll get more into how we recruited and what we really put out to help other departments recruit, which is a lot of just trying to share what worked for us. But it was really just being pretty aware of the challenges in the city. And they're vast and they're diverse for sure.
So leads into a good question. So, the article that I had first seen about this dates back a little bit. And I've seen some of the numbers or heard some of the numbers have gone up and down. So why don't we start with what is fully staffed to you?
Yeah, so when the article first broke, we had no police spots left to offer. Police hiring can be a little complicated, a little drawn out as far as all the steps, as hopefully people recognize the benefit of that, right? You have to really vet these people, bringing in with this heavy, high responsibility. When it comes down to it, in simple terms, you can only give an offer for as many people in spots as you have, which we got to that point where we ran out. It's not where we expected to be. Our efforts kind of piled on and we got traction. We figured out what worked for us and tried to share that out. But ultimately, we had no one else that we could give a job offer to. And so we got there. Things do change quickly, right? Attrition is always a thing. I think anyone from any background in hiring will say you have to keep hiring, you have to keep recruiting, whether it's private sector, public sector. And so that happened where we had some people leave unexpectedly. We had some people retire expectedly, but all to say that the machine keeps going and your needs keep emerging.
So how does it get decided what a staffing level needs to be? Where do those decisions get made?
The staffing levels certainly for the whole police department are way above our head, right? So that's city officials and determining what the needs of the city are. How many cops do you need essentially to keep this city safe? What we found is that over time, as the area density increased with just more people living in the Pacific Northwest, staffing levels have increased dramatically through my career and prior. If people that have family or grown up in Kent can recognize that it's drastically different than it was 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago for sure as a community. So it's increased through the years. There's a lot of people, that public officials and department officials, that recognize and they look at staffing levels per capita and what that looks like with crime rate. We recognize we are lower. So although we're approaching close to staffing again, there's certainly a need, and you see increased crime rates through the region, through the country. And so that's going to be a very relevant conversation for people.
Mm-hmm. So when you're trying to decide where you want to focus your efforts, there's very targeted events, and then there's community events, and some departments have really struggled to, get to both. They end up really at the targeted events. How have you decided what events you want to go to, or where you want to put your efforts?
That's a great question, because we're doing everything. We're throwing everything at the wall, and we continue to do so a year and a half into it. He mentioned that we've had a recruiting and hiring unit for quite some time, but when they brought Sergeant Tung on and they brought me on, it was kind of like, hey, spread your wings and fly and try whatever it is that you want to try. And so we kind of went to all different kinds of events. I would set up pop-up booths at LA Fitness and 24-hour fitness, and we would go to bodybuilding competitions. We kind of did everything, There's a local rodeo, and you're being able to go to all these different types of events, and it's really just engaging people and getting our word out there, getting our brand out there. So our social media, our future cops. We're doing that everywhere if we can. Talking to you now, going on podcasts. We continue to put everything out there in so many different spaces, to include the traditional recruiting and hiring fairs. But you never know who you're going to meet at, the LA Fitness, or heck, I've even recruited when I was out at dinner with my family, and the server was so good and dynamic. Hey, you ever thought about being a cop? So it's so hard to get this job, and we go through so many candidates that if I can just continue to grow that pool, no matter how I meet you at Red Robin or at an event, if you're a good candidate, I want to take that shot on you.
I've gotten the sense too that some of your focus is really just on community building. Coffee with a Cop seems to have been a successful program, but that's really for kids. People are bringing their kids coming in to have a positive interaction. Is that something that you feel recruiting departments should focus more on?
I think so, and I think just for context, it's helpful to recognize where we were and where we aligned as a team when we came into it. We came into this job, and I viewed it as the impossible, right? How are we going to get the number of cops we need in this area with the type of scrutiny that's been unprecedented? We had unprecedented attrition across the nation and Canada, right? The Western world. People were leaving police work in droves, and it used to be a lifelong career, right? A 20, 30-year career for the majority. And now we're recognizing this really rapid attrition. So when I came in, I felt like we had nothing to lose because, failure was kind of that looming thing that we just couldn't accept, but we were willing to try everything. So when Brian says, hey, we're going to throw everything at the wall, even what people said wasn't going to work, we had to try and kind of re-verify that. At the same time, with public scrutiny being what it was and me coming out of neighborhood response, we had the notion and the support from our administration to say, hey, we're just going to approach recruiting as community engagement, right? They're the same. They're one and the same goal. We want people to learn about the job. We want people to learn about cops. We want people to learn who we are, what we do. And so it's one and the same. So when you do pop up at a gym or you go to a community event and it's mostly kids, or you go to a coffee with a cop and it's a lot of the crowd that generally would just come to that just to interact, and you have a recruiter there, then it's all the same goal, right? It's all the same outcome and mission accomplished. So just to recognize that they are the same goal and they can be conceptualized, I feel like was a huge part of our success.
So as policing's changed so much over the last few years, the candidates now, I would suspect, are probably different than what they were before. And so there's this insinuation that it's changed so much. You're seeing it every day. What do you think of the quality of the candidates that are coming out right now, who are actually getting hired on?
There's a lot of scrutiny for that. You hear a lot of people that have been in law enforcement for some time saying the candidate pool is weaker, the candidate pool is smaller. I think it's just different, and I think that's also helped our outlook, and it's helped our success, is just recognizing that times change, generations are a thing. I might not look it, but I'm technically an old millennial, and just recognizing that there's generational factors there. But at the crux of it, when you look at the job, I think that even for police, it's hard to look outside of what the job is as far as concrete actions that you take. But when you boil down what it is, it's taking care of people in critical times of need. And if you're a human being that cares about human beings, and you have a good ability to adapt and respond to stressful situations, then you have just about everything, right? We look for values rather than innate characteristics, because we can train a lot of the things that we expect you to do. But if you have the right moral compass and you have the right drive and you have the right ability to adapt and learn, then we can take you the rest of the way there.
Got it. So I've never met a cop who clocks out and really just goes home, checks out completely, right? And so one of the things I found interesting for you as well, for you specifically, is you also have an Instagram account called BlueGrip Wellness that focuses on people who may be interested in law enforcement and what that process looks like, things they should think about when they're going to go interview, things they should know about in the background check. One of the ones that really stuck out to me recently was talking about people who may want to look at corrections as well as another avenue to be able to help serve the public. Can you tell me a little bit about your effort over there and why you do that? Because that looks like a lot of work over there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently heard that a saying of something like expression is a way to fix depression. Mm-hmm. And I heard it very recently, but it reminded me about why I do the social media stuff that I do. This was following 2020 and a lot of the strife and a lot of the uncertainty in policing. And BlueGrip Wellness was born out of truly my interest and my passions in first responder wellness, and a lot of that being a more physical and mental base, right? I'm a peer support coordinator. I'm a peer fitness guy. And so as far as my team, I recognize if we can spread more health and fitness and mental health awareness, that's going to help the profession and help the community. That's evolved a lot since I took on a more public engagement and recruiting role, right? This is what I think about more hours than I would like to admit. Certainly my wife could attest to, and certainly something I can work on. But all to say that it became a pursuit because it's something that's very relevant for us, me and Brian, something that we have been working on and improving. And so where I can use that information and help spread it to others, right? So it's not just about recruiting people to work at Kent PD. And we say that at events, and I think that some recruiters roll their eyes and say, well, that sounds really warm and fuzzy and kind of cheesy, but it's true. We spent a lot of time with candidates that aren't even looking at Kent PD, or they got disqualified from us, but we'll give them critical feedback. Or someone's just telling us, hey, Kent's not my jam. I'm looking at these departments. What are your thoughts? How could I be a better candidate? And we will mentor, because ultimately we don't live and operate and commute solely in Kent. It's about the greater community. And so any information I can put out has become a huge passion project of mine through BlueGrip Wellness, as well as BlueGrip Radio, a podcast I started, which is really just trying to help elevate police and help elevate police candidates to contribute to the community.
Very cool. What are your thoughts on, I've heard in the past some pretty open statements too about if you are thinking about getting into law enforcement and if burnout is a concern for you, is this a department that you should be applying to?
So burnout's interesting. It's super interesting to me. Speaking of this guy and his grind, his work ethic, sometimes he's sending me stuff at 10 o'clock at night and it's mental health related, some cop related. I'm like, all right, yeah, I get it. But he loves it. He's got a passion for it. For me, it's a little different. So I got this job because I want to go get bad guys, I wanted to go help people. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. And then I started doing the job and was like, this thing's everything I wished it would be, and then more. Like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. And I'm running with him and the dog and looking for, a shooting suspect, or, the job is so much fun. So I transitioned into becoming a recruiter. Well, I didn't go to school for marketing. I sold shoes in high school, but I was just kind of like a dumb cop. Like, I was trained to be a police officer, to investigate, to be nosy, right? To chase bad guys. I learned how to use my hands in defensive tactics and shoot guns. And so this is completely new. Well, then you talk about, well, what's your why? I think there's a direct correlation to burnout, to knowing your why in anything, right? So everyone knows police work can be grueling and tough mentally. I know that people are like, oh, I could never do that job because, the things you see or the people that you deal with and all that. For me, that portion of the job was easy because I knew my why. My why was to go out and help and serve and protect and all that. So now my why has changed, right? Because I'm not out doing that every day. I'm trying to staff up the city of Kent to bring on the best candidates I can. Well, I think that now goes hand in hand with retention and burnout and mental health and wellness. So he's actually our peer support coordinator, and I'm part of his team. And we are always spitballing ideas on how we can make this thing better, this machine better. So, back to your burnout question. I think in prioritizing mental health, well-being, and in getting down to the nitty-gritty of how our people are doing here at work, but then even at their home lives even, right? If you're not well at home, you're not going to be well here, right? In my worst times going through a divorce were my roughest times being a professional, right? And so that why for me, I'm not going to be experiencing burnout, I don't think, in this role because my why is so bright right now and it's so powerful for me. I love going and talking to people about becoming a police officer because this job's awesome. That fuels me. I love connecting with my people after a critical incident and asking those questions and maybe crying with them or allowing them to cry with me. Doing what I can to help retain these people and have the healthiest body of officers that we can. That's my why. So I may put in a lot of hours of overtime, and we have been a lot lately, whether it's out in events or doing critical incident debriefs or just talking to my people. But I know my why. And so other people are going to experience burnout differently, and all we can do is try and help and support that. Here in Kent, can you get burned out because of the workload and just the environment? I mentioned in a group recently, hey, I know you guys been to, I think it was like 6 shootings in 7 days. and you're putting fingers in bullet holes and you're throwing tourniquets on bodies and you're doing CPR, and sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not, to remind our officers that that's not normal human experience, right? We're experiencing a lot more critical incidents in our life and trauma than most human beings, or in a couple of years, than most human beings do in their life. But if we can disengage as best you can, if you can have healthy outlets, if we can, we go to a lot of trainings and we try and provide a lot of resources for people to avoid burnout, then hopefully that helps. And but burnout can be real. It's going to be independent for every person. And I think if you have an agency that, like ours, that and somebody like this who's super passionate about people's wellness and whatnot, I think you can see a drastic. You can see that there's a big correlation between a healthy department, healthy people, not having burnout, and the work that's being done by the department to kind of avoid that. So, long answer, but
I could add a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe
please.
It's not too much. Yeah. So this goes right in line with recruiting, for police and for Kent, and that's something that we share with other departments, because a lot have reached out to see and ask what was so successful with you, or why were things so successful, or what worked for you, and we were just honest. Is Kent a place for officers to go if they're concerned about burnout? Well, that depends. If you're visualizing the cop job, and we'll ask you to do that when we meet you casually, just what are you looking for in a police job? And if you are imagining driving around, meeting with your local schools every single day, and going to coffee and interacting with local business owners every single morning before you really jump into what you're working on, probably not. And that's just to be honest, because that police job exists somewhere, just not here at Kent. Not every day with guarantee. So if you are the type that is invigorated by pace, and if you're not, because some people are actually more likely to burn out if they don't have tasks given to them, if they don't feel engaged, if they aren't challenged. But we say, hey, if you like to have a busy day where you can feel an impact and have effect at the different things you're doing through the day, then this is an environment you'll thrive in. If you like to accept challenges and you want opportunities to wear different hats, whether ancillary duties or full-time duties and different specialties like me and Brian have been able to appreciate and be able to be selected for, then absolutely. However, it just depends on the person. At the same time, wellness is very much a big part of that. I couldn't confidently say that a department with our pace and the type of things we go to, absent wellness programs, I wouldn't be able to confidently say that burnout would not be an issue. At the same time, it's just part of the whole schematics with your city government, and whether you feel supported and whether you feel like you're a resource to do the job. I mean, that's a huge part of it too.
For sure. So you guys focus on mostly intake, but it sounds like you also continue involvement with the officers once they're in. And one of the things that I've noticed is I go out and cover a lot of night crime stories. And so areas I'm at are big cities like this. And so I see officers working some of the heavier scenes most of the time. Morale seems pretty good there for officers who are out in the field, better than a lot of local agencies nearby. What do you think that, if that's accurate, if you agree with that, why do you think that is?
Well, I'm going to say it depends on who you're talking to, because I don't want to say, yeah, we're fantastic and everybody's healthy, and then some of my people are watching this interview and they're going, we're burnt out, or we're frustrated, or right, because there is burnout and there is frustrations and there can be, right, but for the most part, you are right. We have, I think, whether it's a sergeant or those informal leaders who are FTOs and people who've been on for 5, 6, 7 years, if they're on a crew and they're a positive one, a lot of times you feel that impact amongst the crew. But I think that what we're seeing here is some burnout and some frustrations due to our staffing levels. You said that there was an article where we were almost fully staffed, right? However, it takes nearly a year for us to have those people be impact our actual staffing levels. So you might call 911, Steve, and get a text message from Valley Communications that says, due to staffing, we've been unable to respond to your scene. We will get officers out to you as soon as possible. Well, that's because those 36 people that we've hired last year, they're still not out on the street by themselves, right? They're still not counting. And so our people, they are just, I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I think they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And so that morale is only going to get better. We do have good people doing good work who are keeping their heads up, their chin up. But you're going to see a true, I believe, a true morale bump in a really healthy Kent Police Department once we can get the majority of those officers who are in training out on the street on their own. I know that was a little bit different of an answer maybe than what you were expecting, because our people are tired. They're working hard. We're working 12-hour shifts, and they've been busy. Like I said, well, there was a week stretch where I think there were shootings every single day. 5 homicides in a week or so. And so that impact is felt no matter how good the wellness or resources you have or wellness program, right? You are going to feel some of that. But our efforts, this is kind of the fuel for us is we get to be part of that light at the end of the tunnel for those people. And I think that anyone who is feeling that burnout right now here at Kent and are dragging, there's hope there.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that you're observing this positivity with the Kent guys and gals. At the same time, we have to recognize that it is hard, right? It's a grind, and they're waiting for the reinforcements coming through training. But I do think that it says something about our culture, right? I think that whether it's Kent PD or police in the region, if you see them on calls and they're smiling, they're kind of joking it up after the calls, it's because they were there for each other, right? They're there for the community. And I know how that can look perception-wise sometimes when, there's a bunch of cars pulled over the side of the road and it looks like people are, smoking and joking. But at the same time, they just had a really dangerous situation that the majority of the time they resolved without having to use violence, without having to use force. And that's a huge win for us. And that's a huge win for the community. So it is good to hear that. And I hope and I feel that our team knows that the reinforcements are on the way. And as Brian said, the light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter and brighter. And our hope is really that other police departments are starting to feel that and hopefully get a little bit more traction with their recruiting game as well.
So for people who are thinking of getting into this line of work, I'm sure there's many other things that they can be doing. That it's much more than just cops and cars on the street. What other things, if somebody's thinking of going down this path, would you suggest they look into?
Well, let me take this one, because I think corrections. I'm a little plug for our corrections department, but that's where I started, and I'm a big advocate for starting in corrections. Heck, if it was my way, you'd have to start in corrections. That's how much I believe in it. So, and I truly believe this when I say this. I don't think there's any job in the world that is better at preparing you for a career in law enforcement than corrections. You're dealing with the same people, right? That we're bringing them to you from the street. So if you've never dealt with somebody who's high on meth, they're sick from not getting their fentanyl, right? They're mentally ill. They're wanting to fight you. They're angry. They're sad. They're all of the things, right? You're now going to be getting that experience often. The training, you're going to an academy, right? You're learning about case laws and liabilities and all types of stuff. You're starting to use a radio. You're starting to read a CAD. A lot of jails have a CAD in there. And so the training and the experience is unparalleled. What happens, though, is so many boys and girls grow up dreaming and wishing to be a police officer or a firefighter. How many are just dreaming and wishing to be a corrections officer, right? Not very many. So you don't even think about that as a career option. You start down this path to become a police officer, and somebody mentions corrections officer, and you just kind of, there's so many police agencies that are hiring, right? So you go to take a test, and heck, a lot of agencies are paying for your test. We want you to come test with us. So they pay for your test, and now you're inundated with agencies contacting you. I will bring you in for an interview because you passed your test, and then this whole hiring process. Well, Kent Police Department that says, hey, we have a jail, would you like to come over? Well, then they don't follow through because my goal is to become a police officer and not the corrections. Thank you, but no thank you. But they have no idea how much better of a candidate they may be. This is a really hard job to get, super, super difficult. And you may not get it in your first attempt, right? The corrections spot is a great starting point. But you know what? There's a lot of officers that go in, start the jail, and you don't know this, but you're making six figures with a little bit of overtime, great pay, great benefits, great time off. Like at Kent, we're 4 days on, 3 days off, 10-hour shifts, and a tight-knit kind of group of people there that spend the majority of their day together, really, It's such a good opportunity. I can't speak more highly of it. And so I started at SCORE. It's a little bit different than the way things are ran here at Kent. But great people at SCORE, great people at jails all around the region. And whether you stay there or you end up jumping ship and going to the police side, it's a great opportunity.
So, one of the things you've talked about is this is a very hard job to get. There are standards involved, and they're not easy. At the same time, departments are really struggling to find candidates. Where does Kent fall as far as maintaining a traditional standard, and what is your stance on departments who are looking at maybe changing those standards to widen the candidate pool?
Yeah. This is something that I see a lot in national news, right? This city or this state is adjusting standards or changing standards, and it's something that a lot of police are really concerned about when they hear the blanket statement, or a lot of civilians are really concerned about, understandably, right? I think that the fair way to look at it, that our administration and our team tries to look at it, is make sure that it's contextual, right? Let's look at the times and let's look at the context. Let's look at the whole person and what they bring. And so by widening the net rather than lowering the standards, that's kind of the theme that we've tried to approach it with. There are a lot of agencies that are a lot more strict with, let's say, historical disqualifiers like marijuana use. There's a lot of cities that aren't approaching it that same way. They've adjusted their standards because this is not supposed to be a social commentary, but societally we treat marijuana a lot differently than we did 10, 20, 30 years ago, certainly. So it's just trying to adapt with those things. Our testing and our background process is also just trying to get a little bit more past what's on paper. And it's hard to do when you have all these people you're trying to sift through and you're trying to race other departments, but by trying to adapt a more holistic approach and recognize that we're hiring humans and humans make mistakes. Our thing is largely, depending on the mistake and depending on how long ago it is, it might be something we can work past. But at the same time, there are certain standards that we as a department and personally, there's a lot of things that you really get in a dangerous zone if you play with them. Physical standards are hard because the job is physical. It is demanding at times, and to save someone, to be in their critical moment, you might have to do something with a certain type of physical fitness. Another one might be values, right? Another one certainly values, integrity. We cannot waver on things like integrity because the public demands trust of its police officers, and so that's something we can't play with.
So between corrections and law enforcement, if somebody doesn't qualify for law enforcement, do they have a better chance of qualifying for corrections, letting that time pass while they're in the corrections component and then coming back?
It can be a stepping stone because of development, right? So a good example would be a college student, right? We expect mistakes as a high schooler, college student, right? You may be 22, 23, starting to apply at police departments, but we're just seeing some patterns in that personal history questionnaire that you submitted that we say, we don't know if you're quite ready to be a police officer because the liability is a bit higher, right? But if the two things that I'm looking for being a recruiter, I want to know that this person's got a good heart, right? So they are full of integrity, right? Doing the right thing when nobody's watching. And then the second part's a little bit harder to determine is, are you able to perform under pressure, right? We can't have you going rogue or doing something really, wacky and out of training when something bad's happening, right? But so what we can do is, if you're that young college kid and maybe we don't quite trust that you're ready for the street, you can go into the jail and you can start building that resume. Hey, I'm doing all my checks, right? I'm treating everybody respectfully. I'm not getting in unlawful uses of force, right? You're doing something in a much more controlled environment. In a jail, right? You have 4 walls around you. Hopefully you don't have a lot of people in there with weapons. For the most part, that's the case. You have a door that's closed, and so you can make a decision whether to open that door and get in a fight with the guy while he's angry and telling you he's going to get in a fight, or you can, communicate with him and de-escalate him from across that door, right? Use some empathy. You're starting to interact with people that you've never interacted with, right? Kind of hinted on that a little bit. But because it's that controlled environment, it's easier for us as a department to trust you by putting you there in that jail. Not to say that the standards don't change when it comes to integrity, right? The standards don't change when it comes to who this person is, right? If you lie during this hiring process, you're kicked out of police, but we'll get you, we'll come over to the corrections. That's not how it works, right? We need to make sure that this person is going to be, treating everybody respectfully with empathy, being able to connect. That's so much more important than being able to shoot a gun or drive fast well, or, drive well. We need to know that you're going to treat everybody the same way that you treat your mom or your brother or your sister. But so that's kind of why the standard is a little bit different. It's that being able to trust this person in a jail.
So if somebody's thinking that they want to get into law enforcement and they have some concerns about how they're going to do on the questionnaire or whatever they have in their past, would you suggest that they wait for that stuff to take its course, maybe wait some time, or come in and actually talk to you now and get on record and find out what that is? Does it harm them coming in and sitting down and going through that process and maybe not qualifying now?
No, I highly recommend, and we try to build this culture of transparency, right? It's what police need a lot more of, and we've leaned into that with our hiring process for the simple fact of, hey, we want to mentor you through this process. We want you to feel like you're going to feel as an employee here, because we have a huge culture of mentorship. That's the only way that we're going to survive as a policing profession, is if we really lean in and we coach and we build a team, a cohesive team through belonging and through investment. And so that starts even well before someone tests. If someone reaches out to us and says, hey, Officer Cortinas, or hey, Sarge, I got some concerns. I read your disqualifiers. There's nothing overt. However, am I going to be a good candidate with X, Y, and Z? You can even call me. You can give me your fake name. The fact is, I'll try to give you the most tangible, concrete information I can to help you be successful. Because if your heart's in the right place, then maybe you just need a little bit of guidance, right? And that might be, hey, I understand you've done some young, dumb things. I did some young, dumb things too, but yours are just a little more significant than mine and really close in proximity to where we are right now. Here's what I would like to see if you were a candidate of mine, or here's what I would like to see for you to be the ideal candidate. And maybe that would be subjectively a suggestion of saying 6 months, 1 year, or maybe, hey, this agency is at a much more significant place in hiring, or this agency is willing to take a chance, quote unquote chance on you, because they need to hire a lot more cops than we do. I would suggest you reach out to them, because it's really part of the whole, right? Everyone needs help with things. And that might involve, hey, look at this opportunity as a corrections officer, or hey, what are you gaining from your current employment? Do you feel like it's really challenging you or helping you build communication skills or problem solving skills? And if they say no, it's just a paycheck, then I would say, well, get another job in the meantime and go do some volunteer work, because you're going to really flesh out your resume in all these different ways. Resume on paper, but also just your actual skills and what you bring to the table.
Both of you have a lot of time left in your career. What's next?
I've been thinking about that a lot.
That's a good question.
For me, what's next is a lot more with my it's a lot more involved with what I'm doing and how I'm doing it than my role. I don't really know. I'm the type of person that's really tracked out my potential moves as far as my position in police, but really where I want to be is where I'm useful. I want to make impact, and so that's what's fed what we're doing in our recruiting and hiring unit. That's what's fed my interaction with our wellness and peer support and my social media. It's really where I feel like I can be useful and where I can make impact. And so as long as I can keep working on that, challenging myself, and then growing that's a good place for me.
You know, my answer is going to be a little bit different because one, I'm going to give him some credit. So he's my first line supervisor. He's my sergeant, and then his supervisor is Assistant Chief Grove, who was recently promoted from commander. And they are great, and just like we have other supervisors that are great at asking those questions that you just asked and really poking and prying. And you'd think as a police officer, it's natural progression. You get hired, maybe you become a trainer in something, eventually you promote. And but he challenges me in going, hey, that you always talk about impact. Well, where can you be most impactful? And is it being a sergeant? Is it taking more of a leadership role in peer support? Is it in the hostage negotiating? Is it in the defensive tactics? Is it in being a PIO? What roles? What's the Kent Police Department going to look like? 10 years from now, it's probably a little different than what it looks like now. And so I'm always chewing on that for my own professional development. But what's nice is having people like this who are in my corner, who he's not just checking an evaluation box because it's mandatory for him to do that. He cares, and we have a lot of supervisors. And this is an unintentional plug for Kent, just in patting our supervisors on the back. We've been promoting the right people, true, real leaders. I know that doesn't happen everywhere in every organization, right? I believe it's a true meritocracy. These people have earned it, and they're real leaders, and they care about each other and our people. And maybe this even kind of hints a little bit at the morale and whatnot. But for me, what's next, I'm not exactly sure. It's really about impact. It may be promoting to sergeant. It may be something else. But I'm just appreciative of that question gets asked to me by my supervisor. So
I'm asking you both the same question, one-on-one. We just hit the button. We're in the elevator. We got 30 seconds. Why Kent?
It's ability to impact, right? It's ability to really change lives. When you get a couple Kent officers together and you start telling stories, and it's not so much like the craziest time and the craziest things that happen to you, but that stuff has happened, right? The majority of us that have worked a handful of years have been to a lot of really significant calls, and it's really impacted some situations, and some of those are extremely dangerous. Some of those are really impactful in a different way, whether it's a child call, just a really rough situation, a really emotional, really dangerous situation for the kid. Just to have those hands-on abilities to affect something and be part of something greater, it's been hugely gratifying, hugely rewarding for me, and hugely humbling to be on a team with so many people that impact it the same way on a day-to-day.
That's great.
that was more than 30 seconds, just to be clear.
So we just got on the elevator. I'm going up a few floors. Why Kent?
But was I in the same elevator as him? Like, did I hear
I went to the wrong floor. Now I'm going to another floor. You just jumped on.
Goodness sakes. Well, I mean, the daily impact is the thing that is there in the forefront of my mind every time I'm talking to somebody. That's true. That's what we have here at Kent. You're going to multiple critical incidents a day sometimes, but you're doing it with some of your best friends and really, really good people. We maintain a high standard because you want to trust that person next to you. And then it doesn't hurt that we're one of the top paid in the region, right? We got take-home cars. We have fantastic benefits. All of that is part of it, and that's something that you need to consider when you're picking a law enforcement agency. And the last little kicker, we might be close to Seattle. However, we have a super supportive mayor, really supportive city council, and we're just set up for success.
Perfect. You both use the same watch, by the way. That was about 45 seconds.
Oh, gosh, dang it.
I knew you were going over.
So thank you for coming in. I'm hoping some people who are watching this who are maybe thinking of applying start looking at Kent more closely. And for those living in Kent, get a better understanding of what you do. If they see you out in the street, you guys are out there a lot. You're on social media a lot. Hopefully we'll come over and say thank you and say hi. Thank you once again. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.